down. So let's get started with tonight's presentation. Again, everyone's going to be emailed a recording of tonight's webinar, and then any questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the Q&A section, and we carved out some time at the end of tonight's presentation to go through them. Great. So before we get started, we always like to let you guys know who you'll be working with. My name's Emily. I'm the head of student athlete success over here at SportsRecruits. I work with a few different teams at SportsRecruits. I work with our customer success team, the team of individuals. Whenever you have questions about your account or need assistance, I work with them to help you get the correct answer. I also work with our recruiting analyst team, which is a team of individuals who work one-on-one with student athletes going through the recruiting process and providing them insight, direction, and education. And then I also work with our sales team. A little bit about my recruiting process. I was strictly looking Division III, and I ended up playing basketball at Franklin and Marshall College. During my time there, I worked in the athletic department. I worked with various different teams, and I was also the assistant to the associate athletic director. So again, really excited to be working with you guys tonight to just talk about the interview process with college coaches. So here's a quick agenda of what I'll be covering. First, just the importance of interviews and what that means in your recruiting process. Then I'm going to talk about just keys to have a successful interview. And then I'm going to break down questions that you should be preparing from a college coach, and then questions that you should be asking a college coach during the interview. And then finally, carved out some time at the end to have some Q&A. Feel free to throw them in throughout the presentation, and we'll get to them at the end. Great. So the importance of interviews. So the interview with a college coach is really going to happen, during the middle or maybe the tail end of your recruiting process. This is the chance for you to really differentiate yourself from other student athletes who are going through the recruiting process and really leave a lasting impression with that college coach, right? They're going to be, looking at your stats, looking at your video, watching you play live. But having that interview is really the next step for them to learn more about you as a person, and for you to learn more about that coach and the culture of that program. So it's not only a chance for the coach to evaluate you, but it's for you to evaluate the coach as well. Will I be a good fit within this team and the team culture? Do I like the coach's coaching style? Will I vibe with that? The more you do interviews, the more comfortable you'll be. I used to work with student athletes one-on-one going through the recruiting process, and I would constantly be practicing with them. I would pretend to be a college coach, ask them questions, they would ask me questions, and it was really, really helpful for the student athlete to practice. So if you have an interview coming up, grab your parent, guardian, or even a sibling, and really ask them to, run through different questions, run through different scenarios. The more you practice, the better. Another tip too is when I was doing these practice sessions with student athletes, we would record it. So then they can look back, they can look at, were they making eye contact? How was their body language? So that's another tip as well while you're practicing. Coaches will know the level that you're preparing for these interviews. And the more you prepare, the more it's going to show that you're serious about their program. So coming prepared with questions, which I'll talk about different questions that you should be asking, and different knowledge about their program as well, right? You want them to know that you did your homework. And then something that I'm going to say a million times tonight is during an interview, it's going to be a really great place for you to verify the next steps in your recruiting process with that program. No matter if it's an in-person interview, a phone call, a video call, you should always be walking away asking that coach, what are the next steps? It doesn't make sense to have a great call, you get off of it and you're like, oh, I don't know what's happening next. Always make sure you're asking what are the next steps. Sometimes that's going to come up organically, but if it doesn't, make sure you're asking that in any of those interview type sessions. So what are the keys to a successful interview? So in person, be professional, dress well, arrive early, and have a list of prepared questions. What you can do on the drive there, on the plane ride there to this interview, maybe go through your notes, write down a few, read through them a few times to make sure that you have those memorized to ask the coach. A lot of the times student athletes ask me like, what should I dress? Should I have a button down? How professional should I be? Just dress well. Wear something that, you feel comfortable wearing in front of your grandparents, your parents, or a teacher. It doesn't need to be crazy, but you should be dressing appropriate. The student athlete should be the one to lead the interview. They should be the one asking questions in the beginning and answering questions as well. There will be a time when parents or guardians where the coach will turn and say, mom, dad, guardian, do you have any questions for me? That's when you can jump in and start to participate in that interview. But it should be the student athlete leading the interview. Be yourself. Every time I was working with student athletes, I said, you should feel confident going into these interviews. The coach asked you to hop on a phone call. The coach asked you to come on this visit. So be comfortable, be yourself. And if you're yourself, that's what coaches want to see, and that's how you will leave a lasting impression. Eye contact. And I know that is very hard, but it's super important that you're making eye contact with these college coaches because it shows you're actively listening and it shows that you are really interested in what they're saying. Come prepared, have written down, again, you can have it on your phone and maybe, having those questions and you can say, hey, coach, I actually wrote down a few questions. Do you mind if I pull them up? But also, too, a coach may want to know your transcripts, your test scores, what classes you're currently taking. And again, if you practice before, you won't need to look at those notes. So I always tell my student athletes, know the classes you're taking, your current GPA, if you took test scores, if you're involved in any extracurriculars or clubs, coaches will ask about that. Another big thing is being interactive. Coaches don't want to feel like they're just drilling you with questions. Don't be afraid if a coach asks you a question, you answer it, and maybe you ask a question back. So to give an example, Emily, what are you interested in studying here at Franklin and Marshall? I'm really interested in studying government and public policy. Are there other athletes on the team who are currently majoring in that? So don't be afraid to be interactive and make it more of a conversation. Again, establishing next steps. Where do I go from here? Asking, thanks, coach, for your time. I really appreciate it. I loved being on campus. What are the next steps? What do you need from me? Also, too, follow up. Goes a long way with college coaches sending a thank you note for their time and again, confirming those next steps. So let's say you had that interview and you may have forgotten in the moment to ask those next steps. Totally fine. Just make sure in that follow-up email that you're asking those next steps, or if you received them, confirming them. So video calls and phone calls, really a lot of the same thing. What's nice about the video and phone calls is you can have those notes with you, right? On the side, maybe you have them up on your computer. But again, you should be leading the interview and make sure that you're finding a quiet place in your home. If it's a phone call, parents, I know you may want it to be on speaker so you can hear what's going on, but that could make your student athlete a little more nervous. So they should be taking the phone call on their own, finding a quiet room. If you are on a video call, making sure you're in the middle of the frame like I am now. And again, having eye contact and staying engaging. But everything that you're doing in person, you should be doing on the phone and in video calls. Again, asking about next steps. That should be how you're ending every phone call, every in-person visit. So this way, you know what to do next. So here's some questions that a college coach may ask you. So this is a ton of different questions. A coach isn't going to ask you all of these questions, but this is a short list that, you can take from here, write down some answers so, you have that in your back pocket. One I love to point out are a coach may ask you, what are your strengths and weaknesses as an athlete? Strengths, that's easy. Weaknesses is a little bit tougher. So I always tell student athletes, You can be honest about your weakness, but what you should do, tell the coach your weakness and then flip it and tell them how you're working on it. So, for example, you know, I'm a lefty. I really need to improve my right hand and my ball handling skills. So, after every practice, I stay for a half hour and I practice my ball handling skills with my right hand. So you're kind of flipping that weakness into a positive of like, I know this is what I need to work on and this is how I'm getting better. Um, Also, other questions here. Are you ready to handle the workload of a college student athlete? You can talk about, your current schedule and how, you are going through time management. Time management is huge as a college athlete. You have a lot of free time, but you have classes and you have practice. So how are you going to be able to handle both? Giving examples of how you're doing that now. And it could be as simple as, I'm in school from 9 to 3, then I have practice, and then I come home and 2 hours a night is blocked off for homework. If you haven't taken the SAT or ACT, that's fine. A lot of schools are test optional now. So you can just let the coach know, I'm going to be submitting a writing sample or maybe going a different way within the admissions process. I have some questions that are coming in that I feel like could be good. So one question was, what if my grades and test scores are not the greatest? How do I handle talking about that? So coaches will need to know your GPA, right? So you need to be honest about that. So, my current GPA is this, but this is what I'm doing to work on that. Maybe you're taking really hard classes, right? Maybe you're taking honors classes or maybe you're taking AP classes. That's why knowing your transcript is really important because, maybe you have a slightly lower GPA, but it's because you're taking these classes. If that's not the case, again, just be honest with the coach. This is my current GPA. These are the classes I'm taking. What do you need from me to be able to be a prospective student athlete? Like, what is the GPA that you're looking for? And I'm going to do what I can to get there. So just be honest. Okay. Questions to ask a college coach. So it is very, very important. You are not asking questions that can easily be looked up on the school's website or the program's website. You never want to ask a coach, what was your record last year? Or, do you have this major? Because you can easily look that up. Where you can ask, what is a common major of athletes on the team, right? That's not something you can look up. You should only be asking questions that someone associated with the team can answer. Um, so, what is your favorite aspect of the school? What's it like playing a rival each year? What's the kind of academic support that I would receive? So, again, the key thing to take away is never ask a question that can easily be looked up because then it's going to show to the coach, Emily didn't really take her time to do research on our program and on our school. So, maybe she's really not even interested. So, definitely take the time to do the research. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. Look at their past season, maybe take a look at the different majors they have to offer because again, they will ask you, what are you interested in studying here? So you should have an answer for that. So you don't need to spend hours on a program website or the school's website, but just put in, 15 to a half hour to really figure out what that school and program has to offer. And again, we have this in bold. What are the next steps? What else do you need from me after this interview? Okay. So I've had a ton of questions come in that I feel like will really be helpful to go through. But again, just to really summarize what I went through, interviews are really important, and it's really what's going to differentiate you from other student athletes. You should have confidence going into those interviews. College coaches aren't just going to get on a phone call as a courtesy or have you on campus as a courtesy. They're doing it because they're interested in you. So you should be confident with that. You need to do your research and you need to come prepared. Again, I'm just going to go back to this slide here if people want to take a quick screenshot. But, from our conversations with college coaches, from student athletes that we have worked with preparing phone calls with college coaches, they have said they've been asked these questions. So make a cheat sheet, write down answers to these questions, practice, record yourself so you can see how you're interacting. Um, and, some phone calls may just be an informational session of a college coach running through about their program and about their school. And then they're going to turn it to you and say, what questions do you have for me? I always tell student athletes come prepared with 3 to 4 questions at least, and then always be ending asking about the next steps. But again, these coaches are taking the time to out of their schedule to talk to you. Be confident, be prepared, and again, always be asking about what are the next steps post any type of interview. So I'm just going to pull up because we've had a ton of good questions come in here. One, will this be recorded and shared? Yes, everyone will be emailed a recording of this webinar. This is a good question. What triggers this types of interview? Does it occur late in the recruiting process after a college coach has a short list of interested players? So it can really occur at any time. So let me take a step back. Depending on the sport and the division you're interested in is when college coaches can have recruiting like conversations. For Division 3 and Division 2, it doesn't matter your age, that can happen at any time during the recruiting process. So that will really depend on the program and when they're looking to have more in-depth conversations. For Division 1, it depends on your sport. So, June 1st for women's basketball, September 1st for men's, women's lacrosse, softball, August 1st for baseball, and then June 15th for all other sports. So if you're interested in Division 1, it won't happen until after those dates. For Division 2 and Division 3, it can happen at any time. So let's say you've been reaching out to schools that you're interested in, and it's past that Division 1 date, or you've had a lot of back and forth with these coaches. They know who you are. They've seen you play. They've interacted with your SportsRecruits profile. And you want to know where you are in their process. We encourage student athletes to send what we call a feet to fire message. So it's, hey, coach, as you know, I'm really interested in your program. I'd love to learn more about where I stand in your recruiting process. And if you're still looking for my position, I'd love to hop on a phone call. So the student athlete can initiate that phone call as well. Or a coach will reach out to you saying, hey, we'd love to jump on a phone call, or hey, we'd love to have you on campus. So don't be afraid to initiate hopping on that phone call with college coaches. And again, timing really depends on the program. Some college coaches may want to have those conversations earlier on the phone to then figure out, hey, we want to bring you in person. Some may wait until that communication date. I had the understanding that a coach cannot directly speak with an athlete if they are a freshman. Is that true? So again, it's depending on the division. So the communication rules are just for college coaches. I think that's first and foremost what's important. A student athlete can reach out to college coach at any time, and you should be freshman year, letting them know who you are, why you're interested in their school. For Division 1, there's a certain date. For Division 2 and Division 3, they can speak to you at any time. This is a good question. Do interviews with team captains happen often? Yeah, so I would say if you go on a visit, you are going to have time where you're with student athletes that are on a team. So, I wouldn't say that they're going to be interviewing you for the college coach, but, those conversations you have with them, coaches will go back to their players and say, hey, like, do you think Emily would mesh well with the team? Do you think they'd be a good fit? So even when you're on those visits and you're with some of the other players on that team, it's really important that you're making a good impression as well. So that's a really great question. They won't be interviewing you, but a coach will say, hey, what did you think about Emily? Do you think she'd be a good fit? Um, sorry, a lot of questions coming in. I want to make sure. Um, okay. So there's a lot of questions um, about emailing with video. So someone asked, when it comes to emailing a coach, is it more important to have higher quality video or good video, or just put whatever video you have? So it is important to have video when you're reaching out to college coaches because that is how college coaches are going to be able to really evaluate you, right? They can look at your stats, but if they haven't seen you played live, they're gonna need to see video, even if they have seen you play live. It doesn't need to be crazy quality footage. As long as they can see what's happening, know where you are in the play, that's good enough. Even if it's, you know, 5 to 10 clips, that is totally fine. Some video is better than none. So if you're sitting here and you're like, Emily, I don't have enough to put into a highlight reel to create like a 15 to 20 clip highlight reel, that is fine. Throw 5 to 10 clips on there. As long as they're good clips showing a variety of different skills, they should be on your profile. Oh, this is a really good question. Um, I've heard a coach mention that their players investigate a prospect's social media and can formulate opinions. Are questions around social media brought up in interviews? So we have a whole webinar about the importance of social media because, yes, a college coach is going to Google you and they will pull up your social media. So I would say to be honest, it depends on the coach. They could bring it up. Hey, Emily, we saw this picture or this picture. Can you tell us about that? I really don't think a coach would bring that up, but if they see something inappropriate, that's going to be a red flag for them. So I encourage all the student athletes to take a look at their social media, make sure it is appropriate, because just like how all of us Google people or look people up on social media, coaches will be doing that to you as well. So it might not have a negative impact within the interview, but maybe, post visit, they're like, okay, actually, I'm going to do a quick search of Emily. So definitely take a hard look of your social media. Is high school film okay to share, or does it have to be club film? High school film is fine. Someone also asked if it's okay from a scrimmage. That's fine too, as long as it's like live footage of a game, that could be on there. It doesn't matter if it's from high school or if it's from club. Um, okay. Yeah, so is it appropriate for a student athlete to request or suggest an interview, or is it always the athlete on the receiving end? No, it is totally appropriate for a athlete. If it shouldn't be the first email that you send to a program, but if you've reached out to them a few times, you know, they've seen you play, it is totally fine to say, hey, coach, I'm really interested in your program. I'd love to learn more about it. Are you still looking for my position? If so, I'd love to hop on a phone call. So we actually have, and I'm going to throw this in the chat right now. Our resource center has a ton of free material surrounding the recruiting process. It has different templates that can help you with these conversations. So let me just throw that in the chat so you guys have that. Okay. So our resource center is broken down into, NCAA eligibility rules, just managing the recruiting process, how to get recruited, video, contacting. So there's a bunch of different email templates that we have on there to help facilitate that conversation with the coach. It's really important that you're not copying and pasting it, using it word for word. There are places for you to add, for you to personalize. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of that. Mm, okay. Sorry, guys, just trying to find questions that will be helpful for everyone. Can you give advice for a player invited for an overnight visit? Yeah, I mean, similar to the interview and those tips, right? It's really important to be appropriate on these visits. Um, again, these coaches are going to go back to their student athletes and say, "Hey, what did you think of Emily?" You know, you don't you want to make sure you're on your best behavior on these visits because again this is a chance for you to show some of those intangible things, right? It's for a coach and for the players to really get to know who you are. So you want to make sure that you're being professional, you're being appropriate, and again, it's really a chance for you too, as well, to see the culture of the team. So it's a really good, not only for them to evaluate you, but for you to evaluate the team and think, okay, do I see myself on these campus? So overnights, official visits, unofficial visits are really helpful. Um, Something I would tell the student athletes that I worked with was take notes, right? Like just take your phone out, I didn't like this or I liked this. And let's say you go on a visit and you walk away, you talk to your parents, your guardians, and you're like, I didn't like it. That is totally fine and will also be really helpful for your recruiting process moving forward because there will be things you didn't like. So when you go to the next place, you'll be able to say, this was similar to that, or hey, this was different from that last visit. So definitely take notes when you're leaving these interviews, leaving these visits of how you felt. Write down your gut reactions, so then you'll be able to compare it to other visits as well. Um, How can you tell if an interview went well? Um, there's a few signs. I think one, if you send that thank you note to the coach or they have next steps of like giving you an offer that went well. I think a lot of the times college coaches, um, they will be transparent with you if they do not think you're a good fit, in the same way that you should be transparent with programs if you're not interested. I think that's really, really important. And while it can be awkward to tell a school no, they respect that as much as, you want them to tell you if you're not a good fit. So I think if an interview didn't go well, maybe a coach would just say, hey, we we're moving in a different direction. I think if it does go well, it's hey, we want to see you play at this X, Y, and Z tournament, or we want to have you back, or hey, continue to keep us updated, send us film, let us know where you're going to be. This is a good question. I'm a sophomore with a huge college list. Should I send an intro email to all the colleges I'm considering or create a list of 20 or less schools to email them frequently? So when you're first starting off the recruiting process, we suggest having anywhere from 20 to 30 schools. Having a good amount of reach, fit, and safety schools, both academically and athletically. So 20 to 30 is where we feel is a good number for a student athlete to be able to handle when they're first starting off the recruiting process. If you have more than that and do feel like you can handle emailing them, keeping them updated with things that are happening, then have more. But we say 20 to 30 is where you should start off. And I think too, to go back to that, if you are like, if you if you don't know which schools to take off, or you're like, I want all of them, but this is overwhelming, lean into your advocates, your athletic advocates and your academic advocates. Show them the list and say, hey, like, am I way out of touch with these schools? Do these schools make sense? Are there any schools you think I should be adding? Um, okay. How do you let schools know you're no longer interested without burning a bridge? Again, I believe in our resource center, we have an email template that shares that, but I'm double checking. We actually may not, but um, it's just being honest. So let's say you go on a visit, they give you an offer, and they say, and you consult with your family, it's just sending an email or getting on the phone with them, depending on how close of a relationship you have with this coach, and just saying, "Hey coach, like I really appreciate all the time and learning about your program. Like I've discussed this with my family and, at this time I don't feel like X, Y, and Z is a right fit for me. Like I wish you the best of luck in your recruiting process." Short, sweet, to the point. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. Okay. Great, guys. So that is all the time we have here. Ton of questions. These are really great. Um, really appreciate you having the submitting these. Any questions you may have about sports recruits, if you're interested in the different plans we have to offer, we have plans where you're able to work with a recruiting analyst who can answer these questions for you and, really guide you through your recruiting process to make sure that you are taking the right steps. So I'm just going to one more time put in that calendar link if you are interested in talking to someone about those different plans, about what would be a good fit for you and your family. But again, everyone will be emailed a recording of this. Appreciate your time and best of luck.